Only children of Reddit. What is something that people with siblings don't understand? Relationships are hard. I've always envied people who had not just siblings. Because, yeah, learning to have another person in your space is hard. But siblings of the opposite gender. Growing up with an understanding of how the opposite gender thinks feels about their body, about friendships, how they deal with fears and insecurities, and react to power struggles among their peers. All that crap is a complete freaking mystery to only children, and it's a complete mind frick when you run head on into it in your first relationship. There's no person of approximately my age in my family. I've got one cousin but she's 20 years older than me, so I've always perceived her like another aunt. Her children on the other hand are 10 and 15 years younger than me and we don't even meet much. Because of that I kinda cannot grasp the concept of having a non-hierarchical relationship with your relatives, or basically having a relative who's also a buddy of yours. When your parents have a huge fight you have to sit through it all by your own. There is no one to distract you from that or who shares your agony. I'm curious if other only children were very sensitive. I definitely got a big shock going into school and encountering the cruelty of children for the first time. Having been raised by a single loving mother makes you a pretty big target for bullying when you're that naive. I'm still super sensitive. If someone yells at me or gets mad at me I'll probably cry. I never really got into trouble as a kid, so I'm not used to people being mad at me. I'm only 20, so I'm hoping I'll eventually grow out of this. I've never been punched or hit or kicked. I think for people with siblings that's surprising because siblings often get physical in their arguments. Same. Resulted in me getting straight up slapped across the face by goddamn Courtney next door for using all the yellow chalk. I was making a baby chick, that's the color, and I was so stunned I just apologized and left. Speaking strictly for myself, I desire the lasting relationships you have with your siblings and seek them out in my social setting, with very limited success. If you have trouble with your parents you don't really have someone to talk to who is that close to your parents as you are and who understands like you do. So it is only you who has to deal with your parents' frustration of life, their disappointment in you, their anger because you don't live your life like they wanted you to do. Need more answers like this. This is what feels socially isolating, not the mere lack of a sibling. Wife and I are both only children. Net result, our kids do not have any aunties, uncles or cousins, and we had a big family in part because we were only children. How your friends become your siblings, but for your friends with siblings you don't become theirs. Growing up, and still, I have a core group of friends. One is an only child and the others all had brothers and sisters. I feel closer to this set of friends than almost anyone else after 25 plus years, even my husband, but I'm always aware that they have siblings who they are closer to than me. For me that's the loneliest part. Case in point, when I got married they were all bridesmaids in my wedding. But when they got married I wasn't a bridesmaid in any of their weddings because they kept it family only for the participants. They had absolutely every right to have their weddings be precisely what they want, and it was something I felt very aware of. You're breaking my only child heart right there. So true. Even my cousins who I grew up with as siblings leave me out and it hurts. Forever an island. The fear of moving too far away because if something were to happen to either parent, there is nobody else to be there the way you can. Especially hard as an only child with split parents. That if we marry another only child, our children will have zero cousins, aunts, or uncles. The pressure from family to have kids and to have a family of your own is quite high, especially if you have other plans. That when they both go you are truly alone. I don't currently have a partner and my father passed 2 years ago. It's just my mother left. I don't speak to my family that live in the same state, so if when my mother goes and I'm still single then I'm it. I have friends, great friends, but as for family mum is it. Sometimes I say the words my sister or my brother out loud because it feels so strange, because as an only child, I'll never be able to say that. I joined a sorority in college and it was really weird saying sister. It's still weird years later. I'm 30 and an only child. Spent the last 14 years helping the family look after sick and dying relatives, because we were all they had. Nursed my father, 2 grandmothers and grandfather through cancer, dementia and old age. cleaned things and seen things no grandchild should ever have to. Even one sibling would have made this whole process much easier. For any parents reading this, just 2 bits of advice. 1. Your child will want and need time to just enjoy life and cut loose without a purpose. Give this to them, but let them know you're close if needed. 2. Think about your own future. My mother is essentially a shut-in aside from 1/2 weekly grocery trips since my father passed. No matter your age, try to keep your independence as long as you can and start a payment plan for your own funeral. You can pay it off over 20 years and it won't bankrupt your kids. Watching my friends and cousins fight with their siblings was terrifying. It was a great relief to return to my books and video games. Now I'm older, I've realized that I will be alone when they are gone. Also, when the time goes and one parent dies, I will be nearly all the other one is left with. I don't feel adult enough to have to deal with that. My favorite board game is Clue and Battleship. Imagination lets me play other board games by myself, except those 2. When you become an only child as an adult, be prepared for never-ending be careful lectures. My mom must think that I'm an idiot now. It's like, I'm just checking so see if the new season of that show is on Netflix yet. Well, be careful. May or may not be a slight exaggeration. I need my alone time. I'm not being antisocial. I'm not a hermit. I had 20+ years of keeping myself entertained and it's exhausting to have constant chatter in the background now. Sometimes I just want to be alone with my thoughts. When I got to college, and even after college, I found it difficult to have roommates because I was used to things being just my way in my living space, as I hadn't had to share that space with other peers for years while growing up. It took me a long time to learn to cohabitate with others. You are both the golden child and the scapegoat. When you do good, praise rains upon you. When you frick up, you get their undiluted wrath. I'm an only child and an only grandchild, on both my mother's and my father's side, and it's not like my parents were only children. Both have siblings who married, so I have 8 aunts and uncles but no first cousins. It made for a very different upbringing because all of our holidays and family gatherings, there was no kids table. I sat with the adults and had to have discussions with adults all the time, which I believe helped me intellectually, but there were so many times where I would just want to be a kid. It's kind of ironic. I would get lots of toys at Christmas and my birthday, but never had anyone to play with them with. As for what people don't understand, many people have already touched on this, but just the immense pressure of expectations. Also, every conversation you're the only millennial who now has to speak for an entire generation in front of 10 adults. Getting in trouble and not having someone else to pin the blame on. The dog, my friend. I blamed many broken lamps on the dog. That sometimes, we don't mind just having our parents for company. I know what it's like to spend a whole day occupying myself. I think I can largely credit my only child experience with how creative I am. I spent time drawing or inventing stories with my toys, building things and dreaming. I think this general thought process has translated well to my everyday life problem solving and designing as an aspiring architect. I am great at socializing with adults, not so much my peers. Effed up part is when you become the adult, it's still awkward for some reason. Your parents will follow you to the ends of the earth. My mom is almost completely dependent on me for companionship because growing up it was only me and her. It's nice to be close, but now that I'm older and independent, it's awkward when she jokes that she wants to move in with me and my partner when I know a part of her is very serious. How you end up keeping toxic friendships with awful kids because it's better than being alone. All of your parents' hopes and dreams fall on your shoulders, and all of the responsibility of taking care of them when they're older. Add that if the person is from a stereotypical East Asian family, double damage. I remember a few years ago in English class we had to write a speech about whatever we wanted to talk about, as long as it related to the question, which was something like what bothers you that other people don't understand, to the class. I was the only child in that class of 27, and so I decided to write about what being an only child was like, and hoped that by the end of my speech people would maybe not entirely change their opinion on the matter, but have a little bit more understanding. Having finished my speech in front of the class, I asked everyone at the end if they kind of got the concept now of how unlucky it felt to be in that situation. After a pause I was just met with laughter and choruses of whatever, you don't know how easy you have it, why are you complaining, etc. That was a crappy day. The pressure of being an only child, put on you by your family, parents. For example, the pressure to succeed, the pressure to take care of your aging parents. I'm a 35-year-old only child. No one understands how I can be loud and talk to myself when I'm, mostly, alone, and how quiet I am when I'm around others. I'm only child. Eat super slowly. Everyone I have a meal with comments that I eat super slowly. Wasn't until I had dinner with friend, eldest of 6, and her family that I realized the fight for food. We are not all spoiled, but we all wanted to be. You must be so spoiled, but I had to buy my own car, my own games, my own food for a time and help out the household because my family wasn't well off. Also all for the chores that my friends would share with their brothers were all mine. My parents came from huge families, my dad a mechanic, my mom the daughter of a farmer, and with 5 acres to tend to I spent a lot of time doing yard work because no one, including my parents, understood that the kids' chores were only given to one kid. That my best company is my own company. I enjoy being around others and socializing, but I cherish the times when I again find myself all alone. You are the one to carry the legacy. You will be blamed for ruining your family or making it greater than it ever was. We also seem to be a bit more content with being alone and are a bit more emotionally mature due to only speaking to grown-ups our entire lives except for school and friends. At the same time we have trouble making friends a bit more, but that's more due to us looking for someone that's just as content as we are in ourselves. Surprised no one said this. The one perk is, dare I say, inheritance. When your parents die, there's no one else in the world who knows exactly how it feels. You're the only human being on the planet that knew those people as parents. You are completely, totally alone. That I need my quiet times. I don't mind being alone at times. I am used to it and nowadays I kinda need it. My girlfriend who has siblings had to get used to that. In the beginning she took it personal when I said that I preferred some time alone. Apart from that, this is a silly question. I don't know how my life would have been if had siblings. I would have been a very different person. One thing is that I probably don't really understand the sibling dynamic. How close or not close people are with their siblings. I really don't mind being an only child. It's the only way I have ever known. How much it sucks growing up and not having someone to play with you. Both my parents worked 2 jobs when I was a kid, so I had to make up games that I could play with myself or just kick a soccer ball against the wall. I remember I got a really cool Star Wars Monopoly game for Christmas one year, but then I realized I had no one to play it with unless I had friends over, so it spent a lot of time gathering dust. It did get better when I got a dog, but playing with a dog is not entirely the same as a sibling. The responsibility of taking care of one's parents. Most of my friends didn't understand what an undertaking it was when my mom got sick last year. I was her POA and responsible for all the decisions. I had to be available for everything. Court dates, meetings with social workers, hospice planning. Most of my friends have one sibling who could help out or they could tag team. I carried a case of documents in my car so if I was called when not at home I could look up answers. Also, trying to plan a funeral as the only one responsible is ridiculously stressful. I couldn't find a place to hold it. I spent 6 hours one day just calling places to see if there was a free spot. How incredibly lonely it is. I lived in a rural area where there weren't many kids my age to play with, and as an only child, I spent most of my time in my own imagination. I didn't have many friends, so I made up stories and stuff to help deal with the loneliness. If I ever have kids, I want at least 2 so they wouldn't have to feel that kind of loneliness. I find it hard to relate to other people, since you spend your childhood mostly alone or with parents and older people. That is until you get friends, and the idea of having someone on your level is alien. I found being an only child a very isolating experience, and for the longest time I wanted a sibling. I often wondered how different my life would have been, Would I have been any different? I definitely think I would have found it easier to make friends and be more social. It took me far too long to be able to fit in, and even then I forewent a lot of things I enjoyed to avoid being alone, like books, guitar and games, in favor of more extroverted social things like sports, events and drinking, etc. Even with all that, I find it far too easy to fall back into introversion. It's like slipping into a pair of comfortable shoes you haven't worn for a while. I also tend to find that people coming from large families have a sense of unity that an only child has to build for themselves. I had a poor family life, so I didn't think of myself as a part of something for most of my life. And when I compare my life to certain people who always have family to rely on, it used to make me sad. Despite it obviously being a wholesome thing, it did help me pick my friends more carefully as I got older, and even though it was a rough childhood, I can safely say I found my family who like me for my faults and don't necessarily enjoy everything I enjoy. The complete lack of social skill development. My parents basically let me do my own thing when I was little, and nobody I went to school with lived near me. It was just me and my PS2 for many years. There are some weird things I still do today that my fiancée will often point out. If she hadn't, I would have never noticed. The ability to isolate yourself totally from others. Forming shallow connections with people is easy, you have to be able to do that. Older people are usually much easier to get along with. That's all you've ever known. Forming deeper connections is incredibly difficult. You adjust to the voice in your head being a trusted advisor. Usually the only sounding board you have access to, and you know what? He's a bastard. You don't have the ability to look at anyone as being an honest to God nice person. You only see them working towards bettering their own position and probably screwing you over in the process. Things get interesting after you realize that isn't always the case. Some people are genuinely nice people. Old mate in your coconut promptly slams on the brakes and screams frickin' heck. What have you been putting in your guts? Your scone's gone rotten. Whilst the part of your brain that isn't psychotic pathetically whimpers, well, I don't think so. I mean, every rational indicator actually says this person is a bloody good egg. Old coconut jumps back in with you frickin' nitwit. You know they're playing the long game. Must we do this every time? In short, I think growing up by oneself leads to unhealthy amounts of introspection, rumination, a destructive level of suspicion, and an odd inability to deal with unpurposed interaction with people. That is sitting at a dinner table. What the ever-loving frick is with that? You have been visited by the magical duck. You don't have to do anything, he will simply give you a good day today. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.